Hi, I'm Sarah Wiskirchen, and today I'll be talking about Provision 2. So what we're going to be talking about in this presentation about Provision 2 is the overview and regulations of participating in Provision 2 and the eligibility that goes along with participating. So to begin, what is Provision 2? Provision 2 allows high poverty LEAs, local education agencies, and schools to serve free breakfasts and/or lunch meals to all enrolled students for a period of 4 consecutive school years without using school meal applications. So I really want to emphasize the difference between the and or. So you can participate with Provision 2 for breakfast and lunch, or you can participate Provision 2 with just breakfast and just lunch. So keep that in mind as well. Provision 2 relies on data from the number of eligible free and reduced students at the LEAs, and it is important that applications are filled out for the first year of Provision 2. And Provision 2 can be implemented through individual schools or through individual meal services. So that would be breakfast and/or lunch. So what are the benefits to participating with Provision 2? A few benefits for students are that the students are receiving free and healthy meals at school. There's no stigma attached, and there's less time spent in the cashier's line, and that is as a result of having all meals provided free to those students. A few benefits for parents are that there's no household application during the non-base years, and then there's no worry about meal balances. And a few benefits for schools are that it reduces paperwork and administrative costs, it's streamlined service, participation increase, and improve student learning. So who is eligible for Provision 2? So there actually is no minimum percentage of free and reduced eligible children enrolled required. So keep that in mind. With Provision 2, there is no minimum percentage requirement. You would provide breakfast and/or lunch to all students at no charge by participating in the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program. You will be reimbursed during non-base years using the base year free, reduced, and paid claiming percentages approved by the state agency. You would count total breakfasts and/or total lunches served to students daily during non-base years. You would agree that the school will not collect household applications from parents during non-base years, and agree to cover any costs exceeding reimbursement through non-federal funds. And we're going to go into a lot more detail about these bullet points in future slides. So now we're going to go into a little bit more detail about the claiming percentages with Provision 2. So it would represent the ratio of each meal category, free, reduced, and paid, to the total reimbursable lunches and/or breakfasts served. We're going to go into an example in a few slides as well about how you would get these claiming percentages, and I believe that will basically outline and provide a really good understanding of how we get to these claiming percentages. So we're going to talk about a little bit more specifics about these claiming percentages prior to that example. The claiming percentages are also calculated at the end of the base year, and each claiming percentage, free, reduced, and paid, is applied to the total breakfast and/or lunch counts respectively for the claiming period during the non-base year. And these claiming percentages can be applied monthly or annually during the non-base years. So to calculate the claiming percentage, you would calculate each category, free, reduced, and paid. You would carry the calculation to a minimum of 2 decimal places before rounding. You will round percentages to 1 decimal place using standard rounding. And if total percentages for free, reduced, and paid meals do not equal 100, the paid category must be adjusted to make it 100%. Each Provision 2 school must have its own set of percentages, and each Provision 2 meal service must have its own set of percentages. These percentages are applied to all non-base year months for the 4-year cycle or until no longer participating in Provision 2. So this is that example of how we would calculate the claiming percentages for Provision 2 that I mentioned a couple slides prior. So this is a screenshot of the Excel spreadsheet that we use for Provision 2 to determine the claiming percentages. So this is specific for your base year. So your base year is where we're pulling that data from to get the claiming percentages. And you can see here, this is a screenshot of an Excel spreadsheet, and at the very bottom it states August, September, October, November, etc. And it goes through all of the months of the year. And I have a specific month pulled up, which is August, to use as the example. So for this month of August of the base year, we can look at different buildings and input total breakfasts served and those number of free meals, reduced meals, and paid meals for each building. So in this example, I'm only going to talk about one building, but there is room to do multiple buildings in each month. So keep that in mind if you are wanting to participate and have multiple buildings participate in Provision 2. And this is how you would get your claiming percentages through each of these tabs. So for our base year, we're going to start with the month of August, and we're going to do, let's say, Building A. So this first building section, we're going to put Building A, and then all we'll have to input is our total breakfast served. So we would put the total breakfasts that are served into that first box, and then we would break down those total breakfast served into free, and then total reduced, and total paid. That will then give us the percentages just to the right of it of what our claiming percentages would be for the month of August for that Building A. And notice that this just states breakfast, and there's no spots that specifically say lunch. That is okay to take the same tool and apply it to lunch. Just make note that those are your lunch meal counts and percentages instead of breakfast. So now that we have figured out our Building A breakfasts, meal counts, and claiming percentages, we could keep going towards September, October, November, and complete those months with our relevant information for that building or buildings. And if you can remember from the first couple slides, I mentioned that you can do it monthly or you can do an annual claiming. And this is where you can decide what is best for your building or buildings to do it as an annual claiming percentage or as your monthly claiming percentage. And this will be carried towards your non-base years. So we're only completing this for the base year data to carry forward into the future years of implementing Provision 2. Okay, so now that we have determined how to determine our claiming percentages, you might be wondering, are my claiming percentages high enough for my program to be successful? So local education agency considering Provision 2 must evaluate whether the savings and administrative costs associated with reducing application burdens and simplifying meal counting and claiming procedures offset the costs of providing meals to all children at no charge. There's no requirement that a minimum percentage of children enrolled are eligible for free or reduced price meals. A few things that are not mentioned on this slide is that Provision 2 is a good alternative for schools with very high percentage of children eligible for free and reduced price meals, since this does allow those numbers to go towards their claiming percentage. And the paid participation will increase as well once everyone is receiving those free meals. So that is another factor to consider. So when do LEAs have to cover the operating costs? So when the level of federal reimbursement received under CEP, Provision 2 or 3, and or standard operating procedures is less than the cost of providing all students free meals. That is whenever LEAs have to cover the operating costs. So keep that in mind as well. That is something to take into full consideration when thinking about implementing Provision 2. So what is the Provision 2 cycle? I know I've mentioned that a couple times, and I've definitely mentioned base year versus non-base year. So this is the technical definition of the base year, and that is the first year of Provision 2. During the base year, there is no change in traditional procedures and administrative burdens. And the meal counts are taken by meal type, so that'd be free, reduced, and paid. So basically your base year is just standard operating procedures, nothing different. You're just trying to collect that data, and that's why we have that data from the base year put into that Excel spreadsheet to get your claiming percentages. So the definition of the non-base years, that is the second, third, and fourth years of Provision 2 cycle. And the schools or school must serve all children meals at no charge regardless of the child's free, reduced, or paid eligibility category. There's no new eligibility determinations made during the non-base years, and meal counts are taken by total number of reimbursable meals served instead of by meal type. So you would take the total number of meals served, since they are all technically free meals that are reimbursable meals. So to go into a couple more specifics about your base year practices, you would operate under standard operating procedures, and that is where you will distribute free and reduced price meal applications. Eligibility determinations must be made during your base year. Meals must be counted and claimed by type at the point of service with federal reimbursement based on these counts. And the verification of eligibility requirements must be met. You'll also notify the public and parents/guardians of school meal availability. You would calculate monthly or annually claiming percentages for non-base years, and that bullet point is referring to that Excel spreadsheet that we walked through earlier about getting those claiming percentages. And you would retain specified base year records for the entire period that the LEA operates under Provision 2 and all extensions that are, if applicable. And keep in mind, you would want to retain specific base year documents plus the 3 years or longer if audit findings and until resolution of those findings. So some non-base year practices, this is where you retain specified base year records for the entire period that the LEA operates under Provision 2 and all extensions. In addition, plus the 3 years or longer if audit findings and until resolution of findings. Free and reduced applications cannot be distributed during the non-base years, and direct certification may not be conducted. If applications are distributed during the non-base years, schools will either have to begin a new base year or change to standard operating procedures. If schools continue to collect household size and income information from enrolled students for other purposes such as Title I and textbook assistance, etc., during the non-base years, applications for these purposes cannot be labeled as meal applications or give any indication that meal benefits are contingent on the return of these applications. Also keep in mind that the cost of the application processing and staff time cannot be paid for out of the school food service account if the school is collecting that information for other purposes. So non-base year meal counting. The point of service counts are only the total number of reimbursable meals served daily. Reimbursement is determined by the monthly or annual claiming percentages of free, reduced, and paid during the base year, and that is also referring to that Excel spreadsheet example that we walked through a few slides prior. And claims automatically apply the calculated base year, monthly, or annual claiming percentages. So it reduces some of that calculation burden and also human error if that were to arise by inputting those claiming percentages into web applications to automatically apply those percentages to your monthly claims. And this is an example of a form that you can use to count those reimbursable meals for Provision 2. So this is provided on our DESE Food and Nutrition webpage, and it outlines basically how to count each of the reimbursable meals that are selected by the students, each meal service. So the reimbursable student meals have the option of going 1 through 375 meals, where you would put an X or circle whenever the student receives a reimbursable meal. You also have the option to record non-reimbursable meals and adult meals served during that meal service as well, right underneath where the reimbursable student meals are. You will then record the total number of meals served, the total number of non-reimbursable meals served, and total number of adult meals served for that meal service and for that day. So this basically is just an example of how to take those meal counts for Provision 2, since those meals will be provided free. So this is a little example of the verification determination if those buildings that are participating in Provision 2 or are not participating in Provision 2 will need to complete the verification process for that school year. So we're going to start with the Fruits District. So School A and School B conduct the standard meal counting and claiming operations, and School C conducts Provision 2 operations in the Fruit District. Will Fruits District have to complete the verification process during non-base years? So School A and School B will have to complete the verification process. However, since School C conducts Provision 2 operations, then they do not have to complete the verification process. We're now going to look at the Veggie District, and the Veggie District has only one building and is operating the National School Lunch and the School Breakfast program as Provision 2. So will the Veggies District have to complete the verification process during non-base year? So since the Veggie District has only one building that is operating Provision 2 for both lunch and breakfast, they do not have to complete the verification process during non-base years. And the next district we're going to look at is the Grains District. So the Grains District has only one building and is operating National School Lunch Program as Provision 2, but not the School Breakfast Program as Provision 2. So will the Grains District have to complete the verification process during the non-base years? And since they are not participating in Provision 2 for the School Breakfast Program, they will have to complete the verification process. And this outlines some of those specifics that we just went through through the example. And this is a screenshot of the verification report that is required to be completed annually. And in the red circle, that states the sections that will need to be completed if participating in Provision 2. So you would need to complete Section 2, and you would also need to complete Section 3.3.1, and that is also circled, where you would check the box if you are participating in Provision 2 during the non-base years. So how do I enroll my LEA? You would accurately determine the eligibility status, accurately count meals by type, and accurately report and claim meals for reimbursement. By October 15th, you'll have a current and approved free and reduced price policy statement on file with the state agency, so make sure to get that submitted by October 15th. Step 3, LEAs must amend its approved policy statement and obtain state agency approval for each of its schools choosing to operate under Provision 2. And step 4, prior to August, you will need to notify us at the state agency of your intent to participate in Provision 2. So let's say that you were participating in Provision 2 and you're wondering about what do I do at the end of the 4-year cycle. So the LEAs have the option to return to standard operating procedure, apply to the state agency for an extension, or apply to the state agency to operate a new Provision 2 base year in the next school year. However, schools must inform your state agency of planned activity at the end of the Provision 2 cycle. And extensions and new base years or streamlined base years must be approved prior to conducting these activities. Also keep in mind that the state agency must provide schools or LEAs dropping out in the middle of a school year at least 30 days to transition back to standard operating procedures. So keep that in mind at the end or during your Provision 2 cycle. We're now going to go into the record keeping for Provision 2. So you would want to keep your base year records for schools on Provision 2 which support subsequent years reimbursement and must be retained during the period Provision 2 is in effect, including all extensions. Non-base year records must be retained for 3 years after submission of the final claim for reimbursement for the fiscal year to which they pertain. And claims for the base year and all subsequent years are based on base year data. Retention of these records is essential. So for your base year, you will want to keep all the approved and denied free and reduced price applications, the direct certification data, changes in eligibility status as a result of verification and other reasons, daily meal counts by type, calculation of claiming percentages, attendance areas of each school participating in Provision 2, any extension authorizations from the state agency, and the socioeconomic data that will be used as the base year data if an extension is granted, edit check and on-site review documentation, and verification records. And as you can see, the non-base year record keeping is a little less. So what you would keep for the non-base year would be the total daily meal counts and reimbursable meals, edit checks and on-site review documentation, and the reimbursement claims. So if documents are not retained for the base year, the state agency might require the school to return to standard application and meal counting procedures. Fiscal action calculations will be conducted when records are not retained. And state agency can allow the school to begin a new base year at the start of the next school year. How does Provision 2 work with other education funding and child nutrition programs? So specific for the after-school snack program, also known as ASP, for the area eligible after-school snack program, all snacks served in the after-school care program are counted and claimed as free snacks. For the non-area eligible after-school snack program buildings, you would use the Provision 2 only in the National School Lunch Program. The school may use base year derived claiming percentages for the National School Lunch Program to claim snacks by category. Using Provision 2 only in the school breakfast program, the school must use standard application and meal counting and claiming procedures for the after-school snack service. For the school breakfast program Provision 2 claiming percentages, they may not be used in the after-school snack service. How does Provision 2 work with summer school? So Provision 2 schools offering summer school to students, all of whom are enrolled in that Provision 2 school. The school may use Provision 2 in the summer school. Summer school starts during a non-base year, so if that were the case, you would apply the base year annualized claiming percentages for the National School Lunch Program to summer school. You would also establish a base year for summer school operations and use summer school claiming percentages in subsequent non-base years. For Provision 2 school offers summer schools to students who during the regular school year are enrolled in a non-Provision 2 school or in another Provision 2 school. The school has a few options, which are offering standard program operations to summer school students, and that would be the standard application of meal counting and claiming procedures, or establishing a base year for summer school operations and using summer school claiming percentages in subsequent non-base years for the summer school sessions meal counting and claiming process. So let's say this is a specific example for summer school, and there are many more specific examples for after-school snacks, summer school, and some other examples in the Provision 2 manual. So if you have any more specific situations, they might be in that manual. So I would like to refer you to the manual for a little bit more information regarding those and some more information about Provision 2 overall, if you have any specific questions about that. So this specific example is, what if children enrolled in a Provision 2 school during the school year attend a non-Provision 2 school for summer school? So the non-Provision 2 school would need to take free and reduced price applications from the children from the Provision 2 school and charge them accordingly if applicable. And keep in mind the standard application and meal counting and claiming procedures apply. I'd like to refer you to this link to our DESE Food and Nutrition's webpage that will take you specifically to the Provision 2 guidance. So feel free to refer to that, and also feel free to contact us at the DESE Food and Nutrition Services office through our phone number and our email address listed here. Well, thank you.